Hey folks, it's Chris with the Human Project Podcast. In this episode, we talk a lot about connection in a lot of our episodes. In this episode, we're going to talk about what does it mean to be a super connector, and how do we explore the different conversations that all of us have going on in our minds and invite others into a deeper spot so that we can build community and build connection. Take a listen to this episode. Let us know what you think. Hi, Mark.
Hey, Chris.
How's it going today, my friend?
Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious.
Oh, wow. That's, the sound of that is really quite atrocious.
Sorry. Good thing nobody's in the room with me but you, because I have halitosis.
That's not part of the song, is it?
No, I don't think it is. I just made it. Come on, man.
I just remember the dancing cartoon penguins. I'm like, this is trippy.
Yes.
Yeah, Mary Poppins.
Excellent.
And then they remade Mary Poppins, which is pretty good.
I have not seen that one.
You know what was great about Mary Poppins?
Oh, no. No, what was so great about Mary Poppins?
She was really good at connecting with people.
Was she? You're right. I didn't think about it that way. Wow. Wonder what we're going to talk about today.
But beyond Mary Poppins, I've been reading a book.
I just don't know what to do with myself. That's so shocking. Which book is it?
It's a book by Charles Duhigg, who, if you've heard the name before, he wrote the book The Power of Habit.
Okay.
And he talks about like cue reward and all of that stuff.
Another one of your favorite topics.
It is. It really is, like habits. So I'm like, okay, I really like his way of writing through a book and how he relates to things. And so I'm like, okay, well, this new book that he had that came out, maybe it'll be good because it dives into a topic that we really like talking about, which is connection, communication, conversations. The book is called Super Communicators. So I was reading through the book, and one of his main premises, which I thought would be interesting given how much we talk about empathy and listening and the shape of a conversation, all of that. He said that at any point, there's really three conversations happening at the same time. One is, what is this really about? Like, what problem are we trying to solve? The more action, decision-making kind of conversation. The next is, how do we feel? Which we talk about that one ad nauseum.
Right, yep.
And then the third is, who am I?
Wow. Went deep on that last one, didn't we?
Yeah. Because every conversation has a little bit of an identity type of question, is what he posits and what he theorizes.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Simultaneous, every conversation.
Yeah. And the point that he makes about that is if we are not aligned, like we're having a conversation with multiple people, if we're not aligned on what part of the conversation we're in or addressing that part of the conversation, our communication is going to go off the rails.
One situation recently, somebody was calling me for some advice because they didn't feel listened to by people in their life, some of the important people in their lives, like spouse, parent, those types of things. And I was talking to them a bit. I started to realize that was, it seemed to me like if I put it in these terminologies, that was a identity question that she was really asking and didn't really realize. Sure. Not that it wasn't important for her to feel listened to by other people. That's not it at all. It just seemed like there was so much weight on that, what she was asking or maybe even begging for from the people around her was trying to answer an identity question that I'm pretty sure the people around her were not trying to answer or even maybe likely aware of was in the conversation at the time. And it caused those interactions to be very disjointed and painful for everybody, really, when you get down to it. And again, not trying to solve for that, to say like do or don't talk about that, is just kind of the realization there was a disconnect or a mismatch of what they were really at the core trying to communicate about.
Bingo. And I think that's the key. So the book's called Super Communicators, but I think the title we'll go with for this episode is Super Connectors, because if we're communicating correctly, we shouldn't feel that. Like you said, there was a sense of disconnect.
Yeah.
And that's, I think when there's a mismatch like that, that's what drives disconnection a lot of times.
Okay.
Or if we're talking about something we're feeling, and we're like, oh yeah, that's hard. And let me tell you about something that was happening here. You're like, boom, there was an opportunity there to connect, but we missed it. Because instead of diving into that or going deeper with that, it just became a surface level and there was no actual connection that happened.
Yeah.
So as I was reading through this, what it got me thinking about was we mentioned the book previously, Thanks for the Feedback.
Yeah.
Talking about 3 different types of feedback. And if you're not aligned on that, then it's not going to be as effective as it is. So there's a connection there in my brain for those things.
Right.
So I think each of those has a distinct solution or a distinct way that we can talk about those. So the how do we feel question. Like we've talked ad nauseum about reflective listening.
Yeah.
And if you want to learn more about that, dive into the connection episodes, that series that we did. Really great way of talking about that using reflective listening.
And even requesting it as well, like looking at either side of that and being aware. I think that's an interesting thing for us to talk about as well, is just being aware. Do we even know what we're looking for in the conversation?
Yeah. Yeah, that's actually probably a good spot to start. So what's this really about? How do we feel? Who are we? And we may not even be aware that all of those conversations are happening at the same time. Case in point, let's say you're trying to make a decision, a major life decision with your spouse or with somebody that you care about. You're always going to have feelings that impact the way that you're handling that decision. But some of us, not me, some of us are more logic oriented, where it's like we park the feelings off on the side. And it's like, okay, let's just look at the facts and figure out and weigh the pros and cons and make the decision based on that.
I was just going to say pros, cons list.
Yeah.
That's a very rational way to approach it.
Yeah. But there's always this gradient of how do we feel that's seeping into that basically renders a pros and cons list obsolete a lot of the time.
You'll find yourself at the end of the pros, cons list sometimes with the wrong answer is what it feels like. It's telling you to do one thing versus another, but you really feel the other way. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes. Yeah. Or there's been some gurus, like decision-making gurus, that suggest like putting weighting on them. And before you know it, you got like a 37-step process for making a decision. And there's some of that that's just like overkill. But what it reveals is a lot of times when you're weighing those lists, there's one thing that you're like, man, I don't know, but I feel really strongly about this one. There's also some studies that have been shown that the decision-making part of our brain actually happens in where we feel, which is really interesting to think about.
Yeah. Yeah. Not what we believe to be true.
Yeah.
We believe we're rational beings entirely.
Right. Yeah.
And even ideal, that is what we were trying to do. We're striving for that.
Yeah. So acknowledging that those two things often get muddied is a great spot to start.
Okay.
And then you brought the word belief into it.
Yeah.
A lot of the times those feelings or the way that we act or we demonstrate things are based on a belief. So, and based on who we think we are.
Yeah.
Or who we've been molded to think we are. So like I said, you have all three of these combining themselves. And so it becomes really messy. We as human beings are really messy.
Yes. Yes. Yeah. Not robots.
Yeah, definitely not robots.
Not computers.
So how do we separate those things is I think what we want to explore, and realize that you're never going to be able to purely separate them.
Yeah.
But acknowledging them and dealing with all three parts, I think, is the goal.
Okay.
And a good conversation, a good connecting conversation.
Yeah. This sounds very community oriented, which is one of the things at our hearts.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. How you do this well with other people. This is a critical aspect of that.
Yeah.
Nice.
I think on that note, it's because we were made to connect. We were made for communication, and all three of those things are there for a reason. So I think it's important to acknowledge that too. So the decision-making one, I think what's really interesting here with what's this really about, one of my favorite questions to ask in the corporate world is what problem are we trying to solve? And I think it's something that's really relevant in the personal world as well.
Yeah. And the other way, we've talked about this in previous episodes too, the other way to look at that, what problem we're trying to solve, or how would we know or observe that we were having an impact or having a difference or getting the result that we're trying to get. It's an observation question of the same thing. Like, what is this really about? What effect are we trying to have?
Yeah. What does good look like?
Yeah.
So pausing and asking that can be really helpful to say, what problem are we trying to solve? Because a lot of times when we're starting to solve a conversation, we end up going off the rails and we start talking about something unrelated to this, especially in an argument.
Yeah.
Because something gets brought up and you're like, oh my goodness.
Sidetracking or jumping the rails, or kitchen sink conversations where everything gets tossed into them, right?
Yeah. So we've talked about the shape of a conversation before. That was one of the first episodes we did, was talking about what are we trying to get? Let's talk about possibilities. Let's narrow down those possibilities and pick a direction, is the simplified version of that. Yeah. But if you want to go back and listen to that episode, the shape of a conversation will really help with this one here.
It sounds like you're saying that these three questions can be part of that context
Yeah.
of that shape you're talking about there. Like, what is it we're trying to address here? Because maybe we are trying to address how I'm feeling about this. And I'm not trying to solve it right now.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to understand what is going on inside of me of how I'm feeling, or how does this impact me and who I am and how I show up. More of the identity question. Like that seems like a foundation layer for us to be able to have a good conversation.
Yeah, just like the thanks for the feedback, where we're trying to figure out, are we in coaching feedback, evaluation feedback, or appreciation feedback?
Yeah.
It's the same thing here. Are we talking about action? Are we talking about feeling? Or are we talking about identity?
Okay.
That's probably a good way to summarize those. Action, feeling, identity. And we talk a lot about feeling, because that, to me, is almost always what opens the gate.
It takes us to a deeper level and invites vulnerability and exploration of things. Yeah. It seems that the top level is easier for us to access, I guess you may say, or be aware of in general, like broad brush painting here. What's this really about? And it's a little harder for some of us to be talking about how we feel, though individual preferences and experiences differ. I'm really intrigued by this. What does it mean about who am I in this? That I would be like, I don't know, it's just off the cuff. I would be surprised if most people are aware of that perspective walking into a conversation. Like, I'm trying to figure out how this affects me and my identity.
Agreed.
Wow, it's a really big, deep question.
Let's use an example here. So we talk about this in the shape of conversation, but figuring out where to go for lunch. Like, you have a group of people trying to figure out where to go for lunch.
Yeah.
That's an action conversation.
This is pre-playing what we're going to do here in about an hour, by the way, in real life.
Yeah, exactly. That's an action conversation.
Yeah.
It's saying, what are we trying to do? What's this really about? We're literally just trying to figure out where we're going to eat lunch. Now, if somebody picks something or somebody doesn't feel heard by voicing their opinion, that becomes more of that feeling conversation.
Okay.
Like, for you say, I can go to Chick-fil-A, or I can go to Chipotle, or I'm just making this stuff up because I don't think you really like Chipotle. But I've got like 3 options that I can go for lunch. And if Derek and I were to go, sounds great, we're going to go to this 4th option here. Thanks for your input, but we're going to go to this 4th option here. That's going to get to a feeling spot.
Yeah.
Now,
hungry.
Yeah. Is hungry an emotion? Is hungry a feeling?
No, I guess you're right. Yeah, never mind.
I like how it's translated in Spanish. It's tiene hambre. It's I have hunger. Yeah. Not important. But you're either going to voice that feeling or bury that feeling. Now, if we wanted to connect, we would want to explore what that feeling is by feeling shunted. There you go. There's the word for the day.
Okay. Yeah.
But if we wanted to care, we wouldn't have done that in the first place. But let's imagine that we still do that. We go off with the 4th option here. And the whole time you're stewing.
Yeah.
Because you're feeling resentful. You're feeling like your feelings weren't heard. If that gets to a deeper level, it can get to more of an identity statement like, oh, nobody cares about me. Or I feel inconvenienced by this, or whatever that level of identity is. So even with things like that, little conversations, there's always the opportunity for us to get down to that identity level. Now, whether we're aware of it or not, that's a whole different conversation.
Yeah.
And we've talked about renewing our mind and how using those beliefs, those feelings, and those actions can help us explore what's going on and dive deep into that. That's a great tool for solving that.
Because in many ways, those emotions are indicators of beliefs underneath it.
Right.
So we can explore that in community effectively. Yeah.
So all 3 of those conversations happening at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just a really interesting way to think about that and visualize that.
So we've talked a bit about how we would explore what is this really about, the first question. We have extensively explored in past episodes the emotional aspects. How do I feel about this?
Yeah.
I'm wondering what kind of tools and perspectives we might have that would help exploration of, or even awareness of, this identity question.
I think something that's really helped me in the past is when I have really deep emotions about something or outsized emotions about something that I'm like, there's probably something deeper here and it's worth exploring. It's like when Victoria and I are having a conversation about something and I react either like really, really excited about something or get really, really upset about something. I'm like, That came out of nowhere.
Okay.
Why is that? Why did that, the common word we can use for it is like trigger.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why did that trigger me?
Yeah. Where it suddenly goes from cold to hot.
Yeah.
Really fast.
Yeah.
We've talked about this as emotions as indicators before, and that's a good indicator to us. There's something going on, almost like when somebody, like there was one day I came up and I just put my hand on your shoulder. I was like, kind of patted you on the shoulder, and you went, because I think you were in a lot of pain in your shoulder that day. Whereas on a normal day, to a normal person, that's like a sign of affection and kindness.
Yeah.
To you that day, that was indicating something really big was going on. Now, you knew what was going on, but to me, I was learning about that at that moment. Same as you do it for a person with a sunburn that you don't realize and you slap on the back or something, right?
Yeah.
I'm also really interested as I'm thinking about this the other direction. Let's say you see that happening with somebody else, or you think you do. You can only theorize as a person outside. But gosh, how, this seems like this would be a really challenging and perhaps dangerous territory to enter, to go be talking about identity, to be looking at someone. I'm just going to use a ludicrous example so we know what I hope doesn't happen here.
I prefer Usher over ludicrous.
Oh, my bad. Neither, which am I trying to reference? Thank you. But wow, you seem to really overreact to that. There must be some sort of identity question going on here. You want to explore that? It's probably not going to be successful, right? Even if that is potentially true, what's going on?
I think the reason why I wanted to talk about this conversation so much is I think number one step is just awareness that there's multiple conversations happening at the same time. And what we can do is we can be aware of that and make ourselves available to be invited into those spaces.
Wow.
That's to me the goal. Like I'm a driver. I like to move forward in a conversation. I'm type A or whatever you call it, where I like to move forward and figure out what's going on. And I have realized through the skills and classes that EMI and the Human Project offer to slow down and notice. And in connection and community, this is what's really, really important, is pausing. The next step is, how do we feel? I am imagining very, very rarely are we going to be invited into an identity spot. But it's still going to happen.
Yeah.
And I think what we should do as super connectors is make that our goal. Try to make that our goal. To be invited into those conversations where we have such a great relationship with somebody that they're willing to be able to explore that with us. To me, that is what great community looks like. Like, I know I have multiple people in my life that I can be comfortable doing that with, and vice versa.
Yeah.
And it's not something that happens over a day, a week, a month. It happens over this period of time, putting these things into practice and slowing and making ourselves available. And focusing just on that person in that moment. Yeah.
It's not positional either.
Yeah.
It's very just relational and connecting.
Yeah.
I love the way you put that. It's making yourself available, and it's an invitation, even just by being available for that type of conversation, for that type of question, to be able to sit there and then to explore that, to hold space, we might say, in modern language, for that. I think one word that came to mind while you were talking about that was just being kind or gracious to ourselves and the other person is really critical in this. That it's easy for us to judge ourselves and others harshly. All the shoulds can come out, and other things we've talked about before as well. And that being willing to create that space or offer that space, really, if I put it in your language, I like that, to offer that is a very kind thing to do for the other person, in that they may not accept at that moment. And that's also okay, right? That's just an offer. That's why it's an offer, not a demand or requirement.
Yeah. Something like, wow, it seems like that was really important to you. Would you like to explore that together, or how can I best help?
Yeah.
Like that's, I think, the goal, those types of invitations. I think the negative side of it would be something along the lines of what we talk about in our class of somebody being the labeler. Like, it's not our goal to assign identity. Pause before you say, oh, well, you're ADD or anything like that. Like, that's not helpful.
Yeah.
Like, let the other person be the one that's willing to explore that.
I would even perhaps suggest a step further back than that. Even I don't know if it's an identity question for the person.
Right.
In
Right.
the language we're talking about in this with the 3 different questions. I don't know how big that question is for that person or how aware they are of it or anything like that. That's just merely a theory in my brain. And it also doesn't necessarily help to just go shoving that at the other person either. And even in that broad general sense, well, this is an identity question for you. I don't know, but I can create the space and invite and offer.
Yeah. So be aware of that, make the space for it. And when in doubt, pray.
Yeah.
Always a good answer.
Guess who knows?
Yeah.
Guess who knows? And who cares and loves for everybody involved more than we can imagine.
So in order to be a super connector,
3 questions.
be willing to explore those 3 questions.
Yeah. I'm curious, if we do this really well, do we get a cape with an S on it or an SC, super connector?
I think I'd rather have that than wear my underwear on the outside.
That's fair. Though capes get caught in things, I've been told.
That's true. I've seen The Incredibles. I've seen what happens.
You
No
got my
capes.
reference.
No capes. Well, thanks for exploring that with me, buddy. The goal is that we can all be super connectors and help build up the community, build up the body. If that topic sounded interesting to you or you want to explore more on this topic, email us at info@humanproject.us. Hey folks, thanks for tuning in today. Our team is made up of myself, Chris Conlin, and Mark Wavle, and our lead editor is Derek Donley. We're a crowd-funded nonprofit. Our free resources exist because of your generous support. To learn more about us or to check out classes that we talk about here, visit us at www.humanproject.us. Thanks for joining us on our mission to bring 1 million lives closer to the fullness of God's design.